joining us today. We're so excited to talk to Chris and Patrick from Evolute Institute about this topic, which is really close to our hearts and one that we find very interesting. So very excited to be here today. First, I might do a quick intro to myself so everyone knows who I am and what we do at Midoo. I'm Paul Wynn. I'm one of the co-founders of Midoo along with Alad. We are a coaching technology company. We're building smart collaborative coaching software for coaches and their clients to come together and construct those coaching journeys, visualize progress, and accelerate the path to growth. Our mission is to really amplify the power of coaching and bring the two worlds of coaching and tech together and support as many people as we can through that. But in addition to building the software, we also have a small community of coaches, which is growing, and we host community events on topics that are interesting to our coaches as well as to us. And this is one of those events. So thank you for joining us. With that, I'll jump back to our topic of the day and do a quick intro to Evolute, Chris, and Patrick. And then we can start off to hear about your work and dive deeper. So Evolute is Evolute Institute creates profound learning and development experiences using the power of altered states of consciousness. And that's what we're going to hear about more deeply today. So I'll let Chris and Patrick talk through that in more detail. But the crux of it is that through the use of professional and legal psychedelic retreat programs, Evolute created bespoke learning and development curriculum to help people develop their inner selves. Quick intro to Chris. Chris is one of the founders of Evolute. He has over a decade of experience in communication and leadership training. And Chris is an explorer of the mind, which I'd love to dive deeper into as well. Specifically, Chris has done quite a bit of speaker training for a number of TED Talks. He also teaches at Lead Academy in Berlin in several master and exec programs. He's also trained in the integrative somatic process, passionate about consciousness development, integrating different altered states of consciousness into that process of development. And a little bit about Patrick, just very quickly for those joining us. Dimi, who's the other co-founder of Evolute, wasn't able to join us today, unfortunately. So we've got Patrick, who is an exec coach and facilitation lead at Evolute, joining us instead. Thanks for joining us, Patrick. Patrick is a certified end-of-life companion. He accompanies people at the end of their life at a hospice in Berlin, co-founded Over My Dead Body, an online community and service provider that promotes and facilitates honest conversations about loss, death, and grief in a safe environment. Before Evolute, Patrick was an exec coach, facilitator, and trainer for 8 years. And his work is inspired by different approaches of psychological, emotional, and spiritual end-of-life care, acceptance commitment therapy, narrative work, as well as work by Dr. Daniel J. Siegel. So would love to hear more about all of these. I'll stop sharing my screen and throw to you, Chris and Patrick, to introduce yourselves and perhaps start off as well by a little bit of your origin story of how Evolute came about.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robin and Alad, for hosting us. I'm half Greek, half German. I was born in Germany, grew up there, and also Evolute, our venture, is headquartered in Germany, in Berlin. I studied business and economics when I was a young man, and then started my career in communication. So I always had a passion for languages, so I learned Japanese, and then, well, of course, English and French and Spanish and Italian. And so communication seemed like a natural choice, and worked for a publishing company and then different startups in more marketing and PR communication functions. And in 2014, I started to work for an agency that organized the large German TEDx conferences. So TEDx Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Munich. And I just found that fascinating, that I could meet all those interesting speakers on the TED stage and work with them on their ideas. And I had done previously a training to become a business and personal coach. So I merged that with my interest in communication and became also a speaker coach. And I've been doing this for 10 years, being active in communication training and consulting and coaching, especially speaker coaching. But over the years, of course, my interest deepened. What's more than just helping people be on the stage. It went more and more into the direction of leadership coaching and leadership development, mindset development. On my own personal journey, I also got to know lots of different approaches and methods, such as somatic and bodywork-oriented techniques, but also I got to know psychedelic work. And I found this so fascinating that a couple of years later, I decided that we should do something about that and bring this powerful work, this powerful modality also to the organizational world, to businesses and beyond. Luckily, then I met my co-founder, Dimitri, who can't be with us here today, through a mutual acquaintance. And he was also looking for finding ways to bring this work to the business world, especially to entrepreneurs and the startup world. And so we hit it off and we teamed up right away and thought like, how can we do this together? Maybe create like leadership experiences that are supported, enhanced, and catalyzed also by psychedelics. So embedded in a full training program with coaching and support, but also use psychedelics very consciously in a safe and legal environment to catalyze development. That was kind of the original impulse and motive. And the guiding question was, how would the world look like if more people had this experience and did this kind of inner work? So maybe that's for now. I don't know if that's a good intro.
That's a great
I would
intro.
hand over to Patrick. Maybe. Unless you have questions, I would hand over to Patrick to introduce himself.
Yes, Patrick, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul Wynn. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, you actually already said everything that is important, Paul Wynn, but I can elaborate.
Tech issues, that always happens that way.
Yes.
Perhaps, Chris, maybe taking a bit of a step back and going into the foundations. What do you mean when you say inner work? What is it really? And what are your perspectives, or what are the perspectives of Evolute on inner work in the context of work, like as in the workplace and leadership development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, inner work means really to embark consciously and with a clear attention on a path of development and growth, and not be afraid to look also at the difficult things that are on this path. Some people, like in the tradition of Carl Jung, they would say the shadow sides, and to also look at our shadows, right? And also to confront our inner demons and so on. And so inner work is named work because it's work. We emphasize it's not just fun, right? Of course, experience like developing our capacities can and should also be fun, but it also means that there is some effort involved, that we need to keep at it, and that we want to go deep. So we also encourage people to look deeper at difficult periods in their life. Maybe you can leave behind some old baggage, some self-limiting beliefs or old patterns, and to work on this would also include our idea of inner work. But it can also go beyond that and include like working on woundings or something like people would say trauma. So there are different kinds of trauma, but also in the coaching and training field, it has become very much a topic, and people speak a lot about being trauma-informed or trauma-aware when doing coaching or therapy or process work, right? And so inner work might also mean to address those parts in us that are frozen, that are stuck, that are numb, that we can't feel, and to integrate them and bring them back into the stream of life, into ourselves. So that's also what inner work can mean. And it might also mean accessing new and higher expanded mindsets. So in German, we have the great word Haltung, which is like a stance or an attitude. And it's something like a mindset. But the idea is that you can't just switch it like your clothes. So it's a bit more stable, and it's really your lens through which you see the world. So how you think, feel, and act in the world. And this is the mindset. And then inner work means also progressing to higher mindsets, to more expanded or enlarged mindsets, to have more inner freedom and more inner capacity. So in our work at Evolut, we frame very much in terms of supporting people in the inner work, creating spaces where inner work can happen. Maybe letting go of the old and accessing the new in a way.
Yeah, that's such a great definition of inner work. And perhaps throwing to Patrick quickly, let's finish off your intro and also hear your thoughts on inner work, and maybe going a bit further than the definition this time, talking a bit about how, say, for lack of a better word, how a lack of inner work might be hampering people in their life and in their work. And what have you observed in people when they've done that inner work and the change that happens through that? I loved how, Chris, you said it's work. It's not it's not like just a fun activity. It's actual, it takes effort and it's work. I would love to hear Patrick's thoughts on that a bit more as well.
Yeah, so it is work, but at the same time, once you do it, it gives you much more flexibility and freedom. You have so many more possibilities to act out. I think what happens to all of us throughout life is that we get a very limited perspective on life in general, but also on our own stories and how we relate to others. And inner work really helps us to expand those perspectives, or maybe even get completely new perspectives on that. And by that, we can see how much more possibilities we actually have. So we do not need to constantly repeat the same patterns, but we can break them. And this can actually be very liberating. So I think this is one of the most beautiful outcomes of inner work, that after the work comes the payoff. And of course, it continues. It's not work that you do once and then you can relax. But I think once you get started and once you see the positive outcomes, it motivates you so much that I think once you're in it, it's easier to continue the good work.
Yes, I think we're all nodding, we get what you mean when you say, hey, you don't have to get stuck in those patterns that you find yourself repeating over and over, and inner work can really help you break out of those patterns and see the possibilities. That really resonates with us. We've kind of touched on inner work and that growth that happens through inner work. Perhaps now talking a little bit about what you mean when you say altered states of consciousness and their relationship to psychedelics. Are psychedelics, for example, the only pathway to altered states of consciousness? Are there others that you have observed? And if you could just describe how they're related, inner work and altered states of consciousness.
Sure. There are different modalities you could consider altered states. Like someone who's running a marathon is probably also in an altered state, right? So extreme sports can lead you into an altered state, the runner's high, right? Many people might know this. And some people might have heard of hypnosis, for example. It's also an altered state. Or if you are fasting, probably the religious traditions that encourage people to pray and fast we're also helping people to get into altered states of consciousness, non-ordinary states of consciousness. And of course, mindfulness and meditation have become very popular also in the West, so-called West, in the past decades. And that's, of course, also a way to get into an altered state of consciousness, a deep meditative state, or some mindfulness exercises help us to get into also altered states. And what does it mean? Well, it means that you are not in your everyday consciousness where you act in the world, but you access different realms. And it's a bit like beyond the rational mind. So it's like you feel different, your perception is altered, you have maybe new thoughts and new sensations, and that's an altered state. And of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that altered is good, because coma is also an altered state, and it's not necessarily helpful. So, of course, we want to be careful which altered state do we want to induce. There's also some reason why we are in ordinary states of consciousness most of the time. Sleep is also an altered state, of course, and when you dream. And so psychedelics are one, but a very powerful modality to get you into altered states, and in a way that enhances neuroplasticity, and so can supercharge learning, and also learning at a level where we often can't access learning anymore. So on the operating system, you could say, so on the very basic level, like our attachment patterns, for example, how we relate to the world, what we think is true in the world, issues around trust or connection or love, self-love. Those issues are, as many of you might know, hard to access just by talking about them. Or, I mean, talking about them helps you understand things, but it doesn't change the underlying dynamic. And so accessing altered states consciously and deliberately and with a clear intention to do inner work, then can really help us move forward also at a very, very deep level. And that's why we like to combine altered states with our coaching, training, and development programs. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So I hadn't quite, clocked that. There are so many different altered states of consciousness when you think about it. That's a really good reminder for us. Patrick, did you want to add anything to that on bringing inner work and altered states of consciousness together? Maybe with an example of something that you've seen, a breakthrough that you've seen through that process, if you can share that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Maybe to add to the examples that Christopher already mentioned, the process of dying is also an altered state of consciousness. And the similarities between guiding people at the end of their life and through an altered state of consciousness are very striking, actually. So it's very interesting that, this is a process that is very similar to a psychedelic experience or a breathwork experience. So now to your question, I think what happens a lot is that people can really evaluate their relationships, especially their most intimate relationships, especially the parents. So the parents shape the way how we grow up in this world, and they have enormous influence on our well-being, but also on our growth and how we relate to the world. And some people, unfortunately, have a rather challenging relationship with their parents. But I think what altered states of consciousness can help is to reevaluate this relationship and to see that maybe there were also some good parts in it. And maybe that there is also the potential of forgiveness. And it's really beautiful when you guide people through such an experience, and then later in the integration, which is a very important phase after the experience. Later we want to see, okay, so what's now? You learn how those people had a conversation with their parents or with their loved ones or their siblings, and how they found peace with something that was really troubling them for a very long time in their life and limiting them also in living life to its fullest. So I think that's really beautiful. That something like that can be initiated, because again, the work then has to be done after it. You still have to have this conversation. So yeah, it's not the magic bullet, but it's something that can give you perspective and momentum to do the work that is necessary in order to live a complete life.
Yeah, let me maybe add to that, so some people might ask, like, so aren't we talking about conscious leadership? What's the connection between my parents and leadership? But basically, if you think about it, leading can mean self-leadership, and then, of course, leading others in this world for some desired change. And so it's all about relating with others and communicating. And we learn how to relate and how to communicate, of course, as children, babies, children, and then young adults. And of course, it's not only our parents, also our peers and teachers, mentors who shape us. But of course, the very basic patterns are encoded kind of very early. And so often the people that might have, for example, issues with trusting fully, having problems delegating, for example, or a bit like micromanaging, they might have trust issues, and those trust issues don't come from nowhere, but they are maybe a learning from an earlier period in our lives. We have learned that it's better maybe not to trust, because if I trust, I might get hurt or betrayed. So there's how you can see that something that manifests in our professional organizational life can have roots in earlier experiences, maybe even in childhood or youth, adolescence. The often one big step for many people is, especially men in powerful positions, is like to get a bit out of their heads and reconnect maybe with their bodies and their emotions. And if you connect better with yourself, then you can also connect and relate better with others. And so empathy, being able to adopt different perspectives and being really empathetic, is also something that is, of course, very important. And there, the reason why we can't feel might be also because we were under a lot of pressure. We had a very hard time, maybe in our early developmental phase, but also then later. We had like an asset manager who has been in the industry for 35 years, and he said, like, I was under so much pressure for so many years and decades, so everything gets very rigid. The whole system gets very rigid, and you can't feel so well anymore. And you might also sometimes lose track of yourself. So you're in a purpose, what is really meaningful to you, and also there, like psychedelics can really help to reconnect to our essence, our inner purpose, let's say. And this is strikingly often connected to our childhood impulses. So how were you, and what excited you when you were like a 5 or 6 year old boy, right? And where you were connected to free vitality, and to maybe to reconnect to this original creativity, the original aliveness, and so on. That's also kind of, it brings us back to very early periods sometimes to get more fully present and aware in the present moment now. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Thanks, Chris and Patrick. What you described about leadership is so on point. There's quite a lot of research that shows that your manager and your leadership at work have a huge impact on people's mental health, compared right up there with their personal relationships with their partners and their family. And at the same time, we know anecdotally and again from research that quite a few people are unhappy with their leaders, with their managers, and feel like the impact that they're having is more negative than positive, which is a very sad situation, and one that we'd love to change. So we've talked a lot about what inner work is. We've talked about altered states of consciousness, and we've talked about conscious leadership and the connection between all three. So kind of maybe putting it all together now and describing Evolute's work, your Evolute retreats, and what happens during those retreats, to hear a bit more in depth of how you connect all these things together through your retreats.
Yeah, happy to speak about that. Let me just add, we didn't really talk fully about conscious leadership. That's even like a bigger term, like it's a even more expanded concept. And so the idea, like, what does it mean to be conscious? It means to strengthen the observer position, let's say, our meta model of ourselves, if you could say, but it's not just a model, it's a meta perception. So to become more conscious means to become more aware what's happening actually in you and between you and the world while it's happening. That means all levels, like your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations. So one very small example would be we can be very identified with our thoughts and our emotions. So for example, someone cuts me while I'm driving in the traffic, someone cuts me, and then I get very angry, and I'm yelling, and I'm acting out my anger, and then later on I forget about it, I get out of it again or whatever. And this episode just happened. Or so I was fully identified with my anger in that moment, and I wasn't aware of it in any way. But what does it mean to be aware? It would mean like, okay, now I notice this person is just like behaving badly in traffic. I noticed like anger arising in me, right? And so I'm not identified with the anger. I noticed like, okay, my heart rate is increasing. I'm tensing up. I feel like my fists are like getting a bit stronger. I have like thoughts like, for example, this person is an idiot. I have this thought. I'm not thinking this person is an idiot, but I have the thought this person is an idiot. So this would be a very detached, right? A very observing state of looking at my own experience. So conscious leadership means really I become more and more aware of what's actually happening within me and between us. And from this, as you can imagine, if I'm not automatically triggered, I have a much higher degree of freedom. I don't impose an automatic interpretation on something, like this person does this, okay, it's of course because she's like this, or he's like this, or that's always the case. But no, I can actually notice that I am generating my own experience. I'm the cause of all my experiences, and from this perspective, I'm much more free to say, okay, maybe it's more appropriate to this or to do this, or how can I relate to that person in a way that our relationship is not damaged, right? If I, for example, just act out, I might damage our relationship. That might not be my long-term interest or in the interest of the organization. So that conscious leadership means this progressive increase in awareness about all things within and between us. And we also see it in terms of responsibility. So what is responsibility? It's my ability to respond. So my question is, what is my ability to respond, and how can I grow what I feel able to respond to? And so we all know people who care mostly about their family or their direct environment. That's fine. Leadership is I step out of my tribe and my family, and I care about more than that. So I feel a sense of awareness. At first, I'm aware of things, but then a sense of belonging to increasing circles of belonging. So getting maybe to communities, cities, countries, cultures, the planet, humanity, or life on Earth. The largest circle of awareness and belonging would be feeling connected to and responsible, able to respond to questions that concern life in the biosphere. And so the movement of conscious leadership is a progressive enlargement of those circles. So, and there also psychedelic work can really help us a lot, because it's one way to think about it is that it's a technology of consciousness that has one major effect. It's a technology of reconnection. So we reconnect more to ourselves, to our bodies, to our history and past, to others, to nature, and maybe even beyond that, so to all life or to the cosmos or the transpersonal domain. And so naturally, I think it's an experience, and when used with care in the right set and setting, that can help us become more conscious and more aware. I wanted to add that to just that is not like too short on this, but yeah. But then maybe talking about a program, maybe Patrick, you want to talk about what we're actually doing, how we bring everything together, and I can add maybe then afterwards. Jimmy?
Sure. So what we do at Evolead is, first of all, we really give participants the possibility to retreat, so to step out of their daily life, to calm down their minds, but also their bodies, because that is a very important preparation for the experience that they're going through. But what I think is special about our retreat compared to others is then the look that we have on mindsets and how you can use those different mindsets, and also not only for personal growth, but also in leadership. And what is really great to see is how participants are then also able to apply those insights. I remember we had one CEO participating in one of our retreats, and he was just a couple of weeks. It was just a couple of weeks before he had a very important business meeting with investors and a potential partner. And through the experience at the retreat, he really was able to see what was already there, but he might not be able to have acknowledged it that clearly, and that is that his commitment to sustainability in that case was not a good fit for one of the partners. And so with that insight, but also with the mindset model that we use at Evolead, he went into this meeting and he was able to explain to this partner why this was not a good fit, but also to the investors to explain why that partnership would not be a good fit if the company really wants to commit to the values that they are committed. And yeah, it's just beautiful to see how people are really able to apply all the learnings from the retreat program directly in their business. Yeah, but Chris, maybe you want to add a few things to that.
Yeah, I mean, people might not know that. I mean, so you mentioned Evolead, so that's kind of our flagship program, the main retreat program. It's 3 months long, not full-time, don't worry. At its core, it's a 4-day immersive on-site retreat in the Netherlands, where you can embark on the psychedelic journey also with legal psilocybin truffles in a safe and supported setting. But we have 3 weeks of preparation with virtual group calls and 2 months of integration, so aftercare. How do I translate those insights into my life? 2 months after the retreat experience, also in virtual group calls. And the special thing is that we have 4 one-on-one sessions for each participant. So 4 one-on-one coaching sessions, even also before and after the retreat, and on site during the retreat as well. And this is also how we combine kind of our experience and knowledge from the training facilitation work and the coaching work with the psychedelic work. Most people, like providers of retreat experiences, when they offer psychedelic retreats, it's mostly creating just a safe space for the experience. So sometimes it's also very short, like traditionally, if you go to an ayahuasca experience in the Amazonas, it's just one night. In the Amazon, it's just one night. You go like, it starts like in the evening, and then at night you have the experience, and next morning is goodbye, have a good life. And we think that's totally not appropriate for Westerners in a way, because they don't come from and go back to their local community that is already very close knit and in nature. We come from very different contexts, often very far away from nature and from being in close communities. And it's really important to see how can we help people make sense of the experience, also based on our mindsets and what we have learned also from science and psychotherapy about those processes, right? So we have like segments on the neuroscience of psychedelics and different perspectives on consciousness and the mind. And we have adopted a lot of things that are from process work or from really deep coaching work that can really support people. And then next to the one-on-one aspect, Patrick mentioned it, like we really have a curriculum. Actually, it's like indeed a training program. So we do have like content that is for coming, for example, from adult development psychology. So Jane Levenger worked a lot of developmental psychology. at Harvard in the 60s, and from there sprung like a whole school that's called ego development or adult development. And some of you might know, like people like Ken Wilber, or in Germany Thomas Binder, or Susanne Cook-Reuter, and Bob Kegan, also in Harvard, who all worked on the stage model of development. We use this framework a lot to make sense of and talk more precisely about inner development. Otherwise, you can just say, I enhance my inner freedom, I have expanded states or so. But what does it mean, and how can we really understand it and talk about it as well? And so in the adult development framework that we use, in the version of Martin Parmentier, who created a beautiful visuals around this as well, and adapted it to leadership and the organizational context, we have 6 stages. And so we talk about those 6 stages. People can see, like, how do I, what's my dominant mindset? Where am I often operating from? And we have exercises around that to get more clarity around that. And then see what's there to do in terms of house cleaning, keeping, like working something out in the old mindsets to fully integrate them, or maybe I can make a step further into enhanced or enlarged mindsets. And so this kind of developmental orientation, working with inner parts, working with scientific ideas around development is a very important part of our program. And which also makes it then accessible to people from the business world also, or from the organizational world, right? They don't want to go, like I had like a conversation, like we have exploratory calls with everyone, right? Discovery calls with people who want to apply to our programs. And then you said like, yes, I want to have the psychedelic experience, but no, nothing spiritual, please. Not those spiritual things. And so people are like afraid of kind of, okay, woo-woo stuff, esoteric stuff, and so on. And so we really try to take great care that we can speak at a level that people feel that makes sense to them when they come from just the normal organizational business life and have not been dabbling in psychedelics or altered states all their life, right? It might be a bit scary. And there might be also some prejudices still around, of course, substances and what they can do. And so our work is also one of raising awareness of this work, and that it can be really beneficial and can be used in a way that makes sense, also for people who are maybe have not had touch with this so far.
Yeah, but good on them for seeking it out. You know, it can, like lots of things are scary and when they're unknown, but it's great when people can get past that fear and seek out help and seek out things that actually help them grow. I loved what you were saying about, you know, the program is 3 months. There's a 4-day retreat that's and that's where that intense psychedelic experience happens. But there is a preparation process and an integration process. So would love to understand a bit more about what is integrative coaching. Why is that important in this context? I know, Chris, you went into that a little bit, but perhaps also hearing from Patrick, who does that part of integrative coaching, would love to hear why is that important? What does it do for people?
Yeah, so as Christopher already mentioned, indigenous tribes in the Amazonas, they can have an ayahuasca experience for 1 night and then just go back into their communities because they really live an integrated life where everything is in balance with nature. But for us, this is a little bit different. What happens is that you have an extraordinary experience, but then you come back to your ordinary life, where everything can still feel a little bit disconnected. And it's really difficult to bring the two together, to have this experience of maybe even oneness and connectedness. But then you go back into a life where there's a lot of disconnectedness. So the integration is a very crucial part in order to make sure that you can bring the two together, that you do not get frustrated just because you step back into your ordinary life, but that you are motivated to bring in more connectedness, for example, and to bring in more of the qualities that you experienced throughout the retreat into your daily life. Integration can also help to make meaning out of an experience, because not always you receive very clear messages. Sometimes they are very subtle, and it takes some some time maybe to even digest the experience, to let it sit there for a moment, so that you can distract meaning of it a little bit later. So integration also helps really to make meaning of an experience, but also not to take a shortcut. I think this is also part of integration. Again, to remind people that the work begins after the experience. It is wonderful to have a feeling of oceanic bliss and to feel at one with the world. But I think it is important to remind people that we need to work to get there. This is not something that we can just rely on and then go back into the next experience, but that the conclusion really should be, how can we bring more of this oneness, more of this connection into the world that we all create together? And maybe to talk a little bit about the different formats of integration. So of course we have one-on-one coaching, but I think a very crucial part is also the integration as a group. So we have group calls with everyone who participated in the retreat. And that is, I think, very important aspect of integration, to share in front of a group of peers and to be witnessed in what you're sharing. Also, sharing your struggles that you might have after an experience, because it's not always easy to apply the lessons learned. But at the same time, also to hear from other participants their experiences. There's so much that we can learn from the experiences of others. And we also feel less alone if we see that people might have very similar experiences and similar challenges also when they go back into their normal life.
Yes. Thanks, Patrick and Chris. From your description, it sounds like a very rich, layered, very textured sort of experience, the entire program. Sounds really incredible. I'm curious to hear, I know we're coming up to time now, but last couple of things. I'd love to hear what was the process of designing the retreat like? How did you arrive at this program that you currently have? And there's clearly, the reason I ask is there's clearly a lot of scientific input, there's a lot of life experience input, and then of course your professional work around coaching that's contributed to designing this process. So would love to understand how you went about that.
Yeah, partly it was, for example, by realizing what you should not do. So what would be a bad experience when it comes to the psychedelic experience. My co-founder, Dimitri, who is not with us here today, for example, he had quite a traumatic first psychedelic experience he didn't know much about it, he wasn't prepared well, and then he wasn't supported well during the experience. And so he had like a very bad experience. And out of this came like the strong impulse, we need to set this up differently. And instead of having two shamans or facilitators for 25 people, like at Evolute, we have a facilitator or guide to participant ratio of 1 to 2. So we can always make sure that people are very well supported during this journey that might last 5 to 6 hours, right? Usually on site. So, and we have a medical doctor on site, which is often, almost never the case that there's a medical doctor on site with the retreat. So we can make sure people are absolutely safe. We have psychotherapists on site. We have MAPS trained psychedelic therapists with us who have a really experience in those modalities like MDMA, psilocybin, and so on. And all of this, care that we put into kind of creating the container, the safe and supported container, is the result from our own personal experiences and maybe how it should not be done. But also, of course, all the trainings, retreats I for example, I attended over my lifetime, where I experienced great facilitation and great coaching and great support. So of course, everything flows into the design. Concretely, for us, it was important to have a balance between the scientific part and the Western tradition of psychotherapy, for example, and process work and coaching, and the knowledge that's in the wisdom traditions, and especially like Buddhism and Taoism that I think are very valuable and fit very well to the program, to the psychedelic experience, but are also what's needed for us in the West to complement with those perspectives. Then it's important for us to have like to speak to the mind, the heart, the body, and the spirit. So the program components are all like integrating those different things. For example, we have live story sharing. Patrick was cut off when he introduced himself at the beginning, but he's also an expert in narrative work, like how to make sense of our lives and what that means when we share this in small groups, in small trials or diets. And so we have those aspects, for example, that are for connection, for the heart. But then we have embodiment exercises, we have yoga and meditation, we have breath work and the psychedelic experiences for also the spirit and the body and the heart, because it's all in there. It's a bit less for the mind, the psychedelic experience. For change, usually the mind is the highest developed function in the rational mind in with people. But then the models we have, the frameworks, right? The adult development models, how we talk about development, how we frame it, how we make sense of it. This is again for the mind. So to understand actually the experience and being able to interpret it in certain ways. So yeah, those were kind of guiding aspects. So have something for all those dimensions in us and balance different wisdom and knowledge traditions. And then put everything together we have learned about good facilitation and good coaching over the years. So on that high level, maybe I can answer this. If you have more specific questions, I can also speak.
Maybe another inspiration was also the question, how do we want people to remember the retreat? So of course, the psychedelic experience is at its core, but we wanted much more than that. So we want people to get out of the retreat also with an inspiration of how they want to create the world around them. So we focus on things that we think is important for a healthy world: community, connection, body awareness, emotional support, connection with nature. And I think that really shows when participants leave. Some say we came in here as strangers and we leave as a family. And it's just beautiful to witness how you can create a community and connection with just a couple of days. Of course, we have preparation online already and they know each other a little bit, but I think everyone goes away from our retreats with a lot of inspiration of what they want to have more in their life.
Yeah, and I want to add, like, also, I mean, we didn't mention the team, but the team is really, really important, and that we are a cohesive and a diverse yet cohesive team. And now here we just spoke about men, like, because Dimitri is a man and Patrick and me identify as men, I think. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but we do have, of course, like, those are the three male participants in the on-site facilitation, but we have 3 women as well, of course. And from different backgrounds and also from different cultural backgrounds. And I think that's very important to kind of be able to hold the space for people from all walks of life and from all cultural backgrounds as well. So that the team is diverse, like different age levels, gender, sexual orientation, and cultural background. Everything from Belarus and Greece to Indonesia and France, and Germany, of course, as well. And the Netherlands. So it's and then the love and the care and the ambition to have really a professional service for people. I think that's what makes them the difference in the end. Of course, I can talk all day long about the leadership models and so on, and I get really excited about them. But of course, the way we relate to each other and the space that is created, that's kind of the essential element of the experience, and so we take great care, to make sure this is well done.
Yeah, sounds like a very thoughtful process of not just one person or 2 people, but a whole team of people coming together with different skill sets and bringing that all to design this retreat. Sounds incredible. We've only got a few minutes left, so if anyone who's in the audience would like to come off mute, feel free to do so and ask Chris and Patrick your questions. And I've got one last question, so we'll just wait for a second, see if anyone has a question. I see Naomi has left a comment saying that she totally agrees with with the self-leadership being an inside job and it requires inner work. Thanks, Naomi. Perhaps then in the last couple of minutes, Chris and Patrick, what are some of the barriers that you faced, I guess, in launching this program, and how did you overcome them? And where do you see this going in the future? Where are psychedelics and coaching going in the future?
Well, I mean, as some of you might be aware, that there's still like concerns about regulation and legality in many jurisdictions. So that's of course a limit to the work, and it's also the reason why we do our work in Europe, in the Netherlands, because there you can buy and consume psilocybin-containing truffles, so psychoactive mushroom truffles, legally, and of course. Concerns around legality and also some preconceptions about drugs or substances might be impediments to this, right? And so we're really happy that there is a movement of legalization and also of mainstreaming in a way in the past years, and we hear lots of it in all kinds of media, right? And I think Australia also there has been some legalization happening now for the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, right, with different substances. So there is movement, but it's often still pioneering work, let's say, where people have they're far away from this and they have fears and concerns. And so we have to talk a lot about it and raise awareness. So it's not like you just go online and buy like a retreat, like you buy a book from Amazon, of course. It's like you have to talk a lot about the work before people usually feel safe and feel they know enough about it so that they embark on this journey. And in terms of development, yes, I mean, of course, we want to offer more retreats. Currently, we offer 5 to 6 retreats per year. We would love next year to offer 8 to 10 retreat programs, which each time is like the 3-month program. Expand our activities into different formats, grow the team, and bring this work to more people. So that's kind of.
Maybe one area I would like to add is a misconception about psychedelics. So we went from demonization of psychedelics to glorification of psychedelics. And especially with a lot of articles in the medias and even Netflix show, people might be thinking that it's really the magic bullet. You just go through the experience and then all your problems are solved. So the inner work really happens in just those couple of hours. And so for a lot of people, it makes sense to just have the experience and you don't need the rest of the program, the curriculum. So why bother going through a 3-month program when you can have it in just one night? But as we hopefully have explained in this last hour, the experience needs a context. And even with the research that has shown that psychedelic experience can decrease anxiety and depression significantly, what they also show is that after a couple of months, depression and anxiety come back if you don't use this momentum after the psychedelic experience to really start the inner work. And I think this has not landed in everybody's minds yet. So that the experience might be the kickoff, but then you need to start or continue the good work so that you can get sustainable benefits out of the whole experience. And for that, the container, the context, the curriculum are so important.
Yeah, that's a great note to wrap up. Perhaps just for our audience here, how do people reach out to you if they're keen to hear more and work with you potentially? How would you suggest they reach out to you?
Well, if they can see our names and get, they can get hold of us on LinkedIn, of course. But we have a website. So the website is evolute-institute.nl. evoluteinstitute.com with a hyphen in between. But I'm sure you share the link also probably in the show notes or later. And there you find much more information about our work and the Evolete program that we talked about, also the full team and their backgrounds. And you can then, if you like, also, of course, book a call with one of us or apply right away if you feel like ready. And then we get in touch with you, because we do speak, of course, with everyone and make sure it's a good fit and it's a good point in time also for the person applying to do this journey now. So yeah, online through evoluteinstitute.com or on LinkedIn also personally, and then we can take it from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much, Patrick. And yes, we'll share the recording online. We'll share a summary along with the links for people to reach you and hear more and join the retreats if they're interested. Thank you so much for your time today. I know how busy you both are, so it's been so great to deep dive into your work and hear more. And we look forward to staying in touch and continuing this and hearing more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.